I never really understood how conversations worked with RAG chatbots until I came across a completely different thing that I was trying to do. I was trying to build an application and use Supabase for authentication, for user authentication. I've heard so much about Supabase and how it's like there's a huge hype going around it right now. But upon using Supabase, and because it has a Postgres database integrated with it, what it allows you to do is store your conversations. And then I started wondering, okay, how do I store my conversations with the users who are using my application and they're chatting with my application? How do I manage memory, long-term memory, and short-term memory as well? What even are these concepts? What I used to think is that, okay, fine, if you want to keep a conversation going with an LLM, right? You have a simple while loop. You feed the messages list and you stack on top of the messages list, and that all gets passed as context to the LLM. But there's a better way of going about it, apparently. And this is going to be a production use case that it came about. Project. And what used to be, let me just show you my the actual code that I've implemented. Let's zoom in a little bit here. So I'm going to scroll down to how I was previously calling the LLM. So very simple, right? You have a messages list. This is all being passed on to the OpenAI chat completions API, right? That's what I'm using. And then there's just a while loop that goes on. And this message list just keeps on growing. That's not how it's used in the real world. What actually happens, and which is the production use case, is that all of these sessions that you have, every session that you have is going to store each and every message. The messages you are sending the LLM, as well as the messages that are being received from the LLM, each one of those are being stored in a database. And this is going to be a Postgres database in the case of a Supabase. And what happens is that instead of keeping that entire memory, entire conversation message in memory, in your RAM memory, what happens is that each message is being saved to the database, and then each time there's a new turn, all of that history is being extracted from the database and passed into the context of the LLM. So you don't have a while loop that's incrementally building up the messages list. You have all of the messages saved into the database. And this will make more sense when I show you the actual database. Let me bring this up here. So this is the Supabase database that I have, and you can see I'm in my chat history table. I have a session ID for each unique session that happens with the LLM, and so there is a table right over here with role and then content. So this is the user message that passed in, this is the actual message, this is the assistant responding, and this is all, and this is me responding back to the assistant responding, back and forth, back and forth. You can see how there is a multi-turn user assistant message going back and forth. And so what happens is that each time I enter in a message, that's entered as a separate row into the database. And then when the assistant responds, this history is, well, we don't grab the history right now, but whenever the assistant responds, then that message is also stored. And then next is my turn. So on this, you would expect that all of this is being passed inside of a big list back to the LLM as context. But that's not what happens. We actually don't keep this message, this list in memory. We grab it from the database every single time. And what I thought would happen is that this would cause a lot of latency. Turns out that's not the case. There is a little bit of latency, but not as much as you would think, especially since this is a local instance of Supabase running on my machine. But even when you put it up to the cloud and start orchestrating all this in the cloud, it doesn't really take away. It doesn't really, the latency factor is still pretty good. You're not constrained in terms of how fast the LLM is responding. I've been testing it out on my RAG application, and it's working very, very well. But if you are maintaining your conversations as a list in memory, that is something you should probably move away from. I think this is a fantastic way of going about it, especially if it does not introduce significant latency into your applications. This is amazing, right? Why wouldn't you go to it? So I highly encourage you to have a look at this. Have a look at storing all your conversations using separate session IDs inside of a database and calling it each and every time.